Aku, 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 aku. Glory, 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 Puja, everyone. This is a quick sound check before we begin. What's up? Someone could put in the text if you have sound so I can know. Okay, very good. And let's see if we have video. Do everyone. Do you have video? Can you see me now? Okay, very good. We're doing good today. We had a little technical issue yesterday, so we're doing okay today. Puja again, everyone. And Dua, thank you for joining this Kemetic New Year and birthday of Goddess Aset special lecture. Today, what you just heard was a music video prepared along with the music that had been done back in the year, I think, 1999. And with a visual from the actual temple of Aset that you're looking at on the screen right now. And the video was prepared last year for the 2015 Natarian Conference. It's a kind of music video meditation. And it's available on the website, I believe, as well, and on YouTube. But if it's not, we can check on that. Today, what I'd like to do is to conduct a presentation and it's going to have two parts. The first part will have an introduction to the Kemetic New Year and an introduction to the ancient Egyptian myth of the Asar and resurrection. And don't get scared, because that can take weeks to do, but we're going to do it like in 20 minutes. That's the goal. So we'll see how that goes. And then we're going to do the longer part of the presentation, which will be a speedy part, which I've heard some people like Sebai don't prefer. She prefers the longer presentation of the scriptural teaching. But that I reserve for the classes that we do at the Kemetic University, which I will talk about at the end. So we're going to do a speedy kind of what we might call a marathon through a section of the scripture that will be presented today, which is usually known as the Lamentations or the Sorrows of Isis. So we're going to do a presentation for the Kemetic New Year, quick, and then we're going to do a presentation on one of the scriptures of Temple of Aset. With something that I've never presented before, and something that has a wonderful teaching that many of you who know that Aset is my tutelary divinity. This will just be another reason for you to see why that is. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. And this is the Kemetic New Year and commemoration of the birthday of Goddess Aset. And what you're looking at in the background of the screen right now is an image of the creation papyrus. And that is where we get the notion of the birth of the gods and goddesses, why they came into being, and what their names are, and what associations they have, and things of that nature. Later on in history, the writer Plutarch also did a rendition their rendition of the Sun resurrection and of the Anunian creation myth, which is what we're studying now. The Anunian creation myth is the creation myth from Anu, related to the god Ra. And there's a creation myth of the Theban theology with Amun and Ptah, in Memphite theology, so this one is Anunian. And let's go ahead to the second slide, if we can. This is let's see. This is a clearer picture of the creation papyrus. I just want you to see. Basically, it is written in a sort of cross between cursive, hieroglyphic, and hieratic. And hieratic is the language or the scripture of the priests and priestesses. Now, in the creation papyrus, we are told that at the beginning there was a undifferentiated watery mass. And then the god Ra came into being on a boat. And here you can see his boat, he's sailing over the body of a woman, a goddess. And the name of the goddess is Nut. And he created 5 divinities originally. First it was Shu and Tefnut. Then it was Geb and Nut. And Geb and Nut, the story goes, the teaching goes, that they loved each other so much that they were in a sexual embrace. And then Nut became pregnant, but they were still in a sexual embrace, meaning that the penis of Geb was still inside Nut, so the babies could not come out. And the problem was that there were not enough days in the year for them. There were only 360 days in the year, and there was no time for them to come out. So Lord Jehuti, the god Jehuti, came along and helped her by creating 5 extra days. And that's why we have 365 days in the year that is used today. And those extra 5 days are called epagomenal days. So they were able to separate, and then Shu, the god here that you see in the middle, he got in between them. And Shu represents ether and air and space. He was able to get between them. She was able to give birth. And the additional, so up to then there were only 5 gods in the world. There was Ra, there was Shu and Tefnut, and there was Geb and Nut. And then when she was able to give birth, she gave birth to 5 more. And so now we have 10. And so the 5 epagomenal days, they mark the beginning of the Kemetic New Year. And the birthdays of each of the gods and goddesses is celebrated in turn. And I'm using a PowerPoint presentation, but I can't run it because it'll take up the whole page. I guess I could try and see how that works, but we'll just do it manually. Because there may be a problem with the audio. So what you see here on the left side of the screen is the Anunian creation arrangement of the gods and goddesses. On the top there is Ra. He emerges as Khepri and from the noon. Let me move the screen back up again. Let me get some more real estate here. The noon originally, and then Khepri. He stirs up the the serpent Asher, who's in the primeval ocean, and then that creates the forms of creation. Ra emerges, and then Ra gives rise to Shu and Tefnut. And then Shu and Tefnut come together, they give rise to Geb and Nut. And that's up to where I told you before. Then the Pagomenal days come in, and then the next 5 divinities are able to come into existence. The top 5 gods and goddesses, Ra, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut, these are cosmic divinities. The lower 5 are, shall we say, physical or human divinities. So the top 5 create creation itself, and then the lower 5 create humanity, or human consciousness, human existence. And Asar here is, let's look at a close-up, and then we'll look at the dates. Asar is the soul. Aset is intuition or high intellect. Set is egoism. And Nebuchadnezzar is mortality and physicality of the body. And then there's Heru, and I'm presenting 3 aspects of Heru here. There are many aspects. There are dozens of aspects. These are perhaps the most important ones. Heru Pakard, Heru the child. Heru Ur, or Heru, who is the king. And Heru Kuti, who is the one who does the battle against Set, that we're going to hear about in just a minute. But let's go forward. So these lower 5 divinities are the ones that relate to the Ipagomeal days, to the birthdays. And here are the general dates of when the birthdays are celebrated, and we are especially highlighted is Goddess Aset, because there's a special Goddess Aset lecture today. And a celebration of the new Temple of Isis website that I'll be presenting in just a few minutes. So here are the dates: birthday of Ra, birthday of Asar, Heru Ur, the god Set. And do you want to go too much into detail here? I've done a translation of the main section of the creation papyrus, and that was presented in the book Tree of Life, and also the Kemetic Tree of Life, and also it was presented in some of the Unitarian conferences, I believe, in one of them perhaps. But because that gives you certain insights into how the gods and goddesses came in, and also a special issue about Set. Set did not have a regular birth. He did not have a vaginal birth the way the other gods and goddesses did. He was like a cesarean type birth. He bursted out through Nut's side, but we don't want to get into that now, except to say that it is something that the ego does. It doesn't have a real birth. It has a breaking out that causes mayhem. And that's why Set is the way he was. So let's go to, and then so here we have also the beginning of the new year, the helical rising of the star Sirius that leads us to the agricultural kind of calendar related to the inundation and the planting season and so on and so forth. So that was the creation and introduction to the Kemetic New Year. Now a brief introduction to the myth of the Asar resurrection. This was originally presented in the 2009 Unitarian Conference, and I just took a few slides. That conference had like 60 or 70 slides or something like that, maybe more. And I think I picked out about 6 or 7, something like that. So we'll go ahead and take a brief look, because this is a segue. It leads us to the Aset scripture that we're going to be looking at. And this was presented in two books, African Religion, Volume 4, Asar Theology, and that's for adults. And then the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, that's for children. Now, there was a time when human beings were existing on Earth, but they needed guidance. And I'm going to be summarizing the story. This is an epic, long study that goes on for months and years. I'm condensing it into very brief. If you want to go into the longer study, we have, of course, the book and the recordings of the lectures and things like that. Ra asked Asar and Aset to come down to the earth. At this point, they were gods and goddesses. They were god and goddess, and they were living in heaven with Ra. And he asked them to come down to earth, but not as god and goddess, but as physical beings. Then they regain their goddess status, and there's a separate teaching about that, especially how Aset regained her goddesshood. But then they still remained on Earth in their physical bodies, even though they were enlightened. And they served as king and queen of Kemetic for a long time. And this is a representation of the temple, and we're using it as an image of the palace. So you can see Asar on the right hand and sitting in his throne, and Aset and Nebuchadnezzar, and there's a party going on. Asar liked to have parties, and he liked to celebrate life. And he was a very beloved king. Everybody loved him. He spread the teaching of Shetab Neter, the Egyptian mysteries. He spread that around the world. There are stories of how he went to other parts of Africa, and he went to Europe, and he went to as far as China, spreading the teaching. But his brother Set was jealous, and at one of Asar's parties, he got him to get into a coffin, and then he locked the coffin up and threw it into the Nile, and the coffin sailed away into the Mediterranean. Set went and found the body and brought it back, and then she revived. This is, again, we're summarizing a section of the teaching, a section of the myth. She revived the body, and then Asar his body was alive enough so that they could conceive a child. And that child, the name of that child was Heru. And since Asar's brother Set had killed him and had taken over the throne, he was the king now. And by the way, the movie that came out a couple of months ago, Gods of Egypt or something like that, is a total fabrication of the story. The basic elements are there, but they're twisted in such a way that anyone who has studied the real history of the teaching is totally incomprehensible and totally unrecognizable. I'll just say that for now. We'll leave it at that. This is an image of the birth of Heru. Aset giving birth to Heru with the assistance of Amun and Lord Jehuti. He's the same Lord Jehuti who helped Nut earlier to give birth to the 5 human gods and goddesses. And the 5 human gods and goddesses come into being, and they make it possible for humans to exist. Because you need a soul, you need an intellect, you need ego. You also need physicality. But also you need something else. You need spiritual aspiration. And that is what happens when Heru is born. When Set kills Asar, he is trying to kill off the soul so that he, the ego, can take over and be the undisputed ruler. But since the soul and intuition, wisdom, Aset and Asar have given birth to Heru, who is intuition, who is redemption, then that plan of Set is going to fail. And that is what the Asar resurrection story is all about. And if you understand that mythic teaching, then, and you live by it, then your egoism is going to subside and your immortal soul is going to resurrect. And that is the basic purpose of the mythic teaching. But you have to go through a study of it, you have to go through a devotional process to it, you have to go through a cleansing, an ethical cleansing, and you have to meet the struggle of life, which is really the struggle against Set, which is egoism. And you have to learn how to vanquish that egoism. Now, after the birth of Heru, Aset went into hiding because Set was still the king. And let's see if we can find, since I'm doing this manually, let's see if I can find the images. There's Set, and here is Aset. We can get her out from behind the picture. This image here is of like as if a fortress, and or a place of confinement. And what has happened is that Aset went into hiding with the child, with the newborn child, and then Set found out about it, that she had revived Asar, and so this is going to jeopardize his kingship, and he does not want that. So, but in the meantime, Aset knew that he was after her, so Aset gave up the child to one of her cousins, one of her goddess cousins, and then she was caught by Set and placed in the prison. And what this means is that egoism is trying to lock away your intellect. And you see a lot of people walking around the world who are dumb, and they have intellectual atrophy. It's terrible in a way. It's like I was listening to a Gary Knowles show the other day, and he was playing audio tapes of contestants for Miss America. And they were asking them, do you think math is important to be taught in schools? And a couple of the girls said, no, I don't think math is important. I think children should have the choice of what they want to learn, and we don't need math for anything, and the Bible is all we need. Another person, this is a different recording, they asked the person, of course, we need mathematics. And ancient Egyptians, you can't have mathematics without the miracles of the temples and the pyramids and everything else. Another person, they asked them if they tell them as a fact, the Chinese have attacked Mount Rushmore. Do you think something should be done about that? And some people said no. I think we should let them attack wherever they want to attack. We should stay out of it and not get into wars. We're in too many wars. And yes, we're in too many wars. That's for sure. The United States' empire has too much a warlike mentality and warmongering and so on and so forth. But if Mount Rushmore is in the United States, so if China's attacking Mount Rushmore, they're attacking the United States. So they don't know that Mount Rushmore is in the United States. And we can go on and on and on What country did the United States fight against for independence? Uh, France, China, South Africa. These were the answers. Uh, and this gives you an idea of intellectual atrophy and the dumbing down of the population. And so, if the idea is that what Set is trying to do is that he is trying to lock away the intellect, and there's a later in history there's a similar story to this one, which is probably where they got it from in India, where the god Rama and Sita. Ravana is plays the part of Set, and Sita plays the part of Aset in that myth. And Ravana takes her away and locks her away. And in the same way, Set is locking away Aset, who is the high intellect, the wisdom, because he thinks that if he can't catch Heru because he doesn't know where Heru is to kill him, at least if he can stop Aset, he can stop her from infusing him with wisdom, and then he'll be a dumb jerk that Set can manipulate and control and dominate and rule over. And but in any case, a time when Set was away doing his Setian things, he was a terrible ruler. He was a sadist and a killer and a despotic king. And what happened was that Lord Jehuti came over and helped Aset and freed her from the prison where she was. And then she was able to go back and find Heru, and the story goes on from there. And of course, she taught him. But here is one of the episodes where she meets up with one of her cousins, the goddess Selket. And Selket is the scorpion goddess, and she helps her cousin out by giving her 7 scorpions to guide and protect her as she goes through the papyrus swamps, as she goes seeking out shelter. And all this is leading us to the scripture. So then what happens is that while Aset was running away, she was in hiding. She was basically a fugitive. You can imagine a single mother with a child. The king is after her, and he sends out soldiers to search everywhere. And she's running away. She comes to the house of a rich woman, a well-to-do woman in a city in the Delta region. And this woman slams the door on her. She says, she's knocking at the door. I need help. Let me in. And the woman rejects her. She slams the door on her. And if you can imagine, so here's a woman running away, and she's got 7 scorpions with her. And she's got a little baby, and the woman knew that she was a fugitive, because the word was out that she's a fugitive, that Aset is a fugitive running around. Anybody who's helping her is going to get caught up in her fate and things like that. And then the woman also had a child, and she rejected Aset, and she slammed the door on her. And then one of the scorpions that was with Aset got upset, got angry, as you can see, and then he slipped under the door and bit the baby of the well-to-do lady. And the baby was bitten, and if you imagine what goes on from there, it caused a ruckus in the house. things to get knocked over, and then a fire broke out. So from here, I think this is the last slide for this part of the presentation. So that was the end of part one of the presentation. And not too bad. We're doing pretty good on time there. Now we're going to go to part two. This is the commemorative lecture for the Temple of Aset and the Kemetic University, Egyptian Mystery School, Egyptian Yoga. And it is a presentation of a scripture that is usually referred to as Lamentations of Isis, or the Sorrows of Isis, and I'm calling it the Passion of Isis, the Passion of Aset. And before we move into it, let's do a brief invocatory prayer. This prayer comes from the Holy of Holies, the one I showed you earlier with the video, from this room. Duayant Aset, Hedhedu Mudneter, Nebet Pet Henu, Abu Diti Neteru. Adorations to she, Isis Hathor, Mother of the Divine Self, and Mistress of Abaton. Abaton is the temple complex island where her temple was, and Queen of the Gods and Goddesses. So, in the myth that we talked about just before in part one, this is where it leaves off. And this is something I never presented. This is a hieroglyphic text that talks about this section of the myth of the Asar and resurrection. And it is inscribed on a panel called the Mythic stela. And these are excerpts that I'm going to present. The teaching has something like 200 verses or 200 lines of text, and we are only going to be looking at about 20 or so, for obvious reasons, because of time. And this is an overview study. This is not a detailed study. So I'm going to be reading. As you know, I do a trilinear translation process where we have the first line is let me enlarge it a little bit. The first line is a phonetic or transliteration, and the second line is a word for word English. And then the third line is the point 3 line is a contextual translation. And the contextual translation contains mythic teaching. It contains philosophical insight as well. So it is a broader contextual rendition where you see where everything comes from because of the trilinear process. And trilinear means there are 3 lines of translation or 3 levels of translation. So you have the original in verse, and then you have the point 1, point 2, and point 3. If you read all the point 3s together, you should have like a prose narrative of the teaching. Okay? And that is one of the benefits of doing it this way. So I'm going to read the line point 1 and point 3, and we're going to skip point 2 for now. Nuk Aset Perku Emma Aper Etanua. I am the goddess of Isis, and I want to let you know that I have come forth for you from the prison given to me. So Aset wants you to know, you who are reading this, you who are the student, the initiate, that she has come forth for you, and she has emerged from that prison for your sake. Verse 2.1, Sen a seter el. See some of the text that's moved around a little bit. Seter el es as jedna jehuti neder ur. So the prison that was given to me by my brother Set to deal with it. Now look here. The following words are spoken by my uncle, Lord Thoth, which is Lord Jehuti, who is a great God. Verse 3.1. Herde ma empet ta mat el Aset. 3.3. The chief of Thoth, who is a great God, and the chief of righteousness and truth, both in heaven and on earth, the wisdom of cosmic law of creation. He said to me, "Come now, Isis." In verse 4, 4.1, Neter, Nefer, Hu Sejem Ankh Ua Seshems. Come now, Isis, the goddess. It is beautiful to allow oneself to be humble to the authority and process of listening and obeying. There is life and not death and suffering for one who is led by, guided by. And this is one of the first great, we've been through a couple of great teachings already. First of all, we know that Aset has emerged from the prison, or is emerging from the prison. We know that she is doing this for our sake. She's doing this for our glory. For all of you who are listening, as individuals, human beings, she's doing it for you. And we know that Lord Jehuti has come to help her. And what it means is that everything that Lord Jehuti represents is coming to help her. So he is the chief of Ma'at, the chief of righteousness and truth, of heaven and earth, not just the truth of the physical world, which is relative, but the truth of the spiritual world as well, the cosmic law, which is Ma'at. And so that is what's coming to help the intuitional wisdom of your personality. So come now, Asar. And now the next great teaching is, it is beneficial to allow oneself to be under and want to be humble to the authority of listening and obeying, which is Sejem. That's what this symbol here is, Sejem. Listening and obeying. And so Lord Jehuti is proclaiming the benefit of listening and obeying to the teaching of righteousness and truth. And that is what liberates the intellect. That is what liberates the intuitional wisdom and what cures the atrophy of the intellect. And that is what we don't have in this country. We have people who are proud to be dumb, proud to be fools, and also those who are working to promote that, like people in Texas who are taking historical items out of the textbook so that people don't learn about them. And when people become dumb, they are more easily manipulated, easily controlled, because they live out of fear and ignorance instead of wisdom and self-respect. So that's what's behind what Set is trying to do. So he's saying that it is beneficial to be listening, and as those of you who know, in the teaching of Het Heru and Jehuti is preceptor par excellence for Lady Heru. And here he's acting in a similar way to Aset. So it is beneficial to be humble, it is beneficial to be obedient, and it is beneficial to be quiet and attentive and listening instead of boisterous, instead of egoistic, and talking instead of listening. There are many people who talk instead of listen. It doesn't just happen to me. There are people who call, who are spiritual aspirants who want to get advice, and then they may call and say, "Dr. Ashby, can you ask me a question? I have a problem with my family member. I don't know what to do, and can you help me, please? Say, this is what's happening, such and such and such and such and such." And then the teacher will start speaking. Okay, well, this is the situation I see. This is what's going on, and then they interrupt. Yes, and this happened, and that happened, and I can't deal with this, and I don't want to do, and then by the time goes by, they have not listened. They are just putting out, and that is okay, because to the extent that the sage Tahotep in his teaching said that sometimes what a person needs is a good listening. They need to unburden their heart. Okay, so you unburden your heart. Now shut up and listen to the wisdom teaching and get advice and improve your life. But no, there is so much ignorance that there's also disobedience. There is incapacity to listen. Because they're so full of themselves and their egoism and the ignorance that they don't even know that they're supposed to listen. And so Lord Jehuti is talking about that. And Aset is therefore a prime listener, a prime example of what it means to listen to the teaching and to grow. To be a goddess of wisdom, and everyone has that capacity in them if they are able to calm the mind and live by truth. These are the keys to be able to get to quietness and to be able to get willpower to obey the teaching and lead oneself to a greater life, to a better life. I'm not sure. Has the video frozen? It looks like it's frozen on my side. Yeah. I will. We'll take a quick break. I will log out and log back in, and we will start where we left off. That's it. That should fix the video. Good, everyone. I'm back now, and let me know if you see the video and the desktop, also the scripture. Okay, very good. Very good. So now we move to verse 5, 5.1. Ki sedga et ker sa neken. So it's good to be guided by another. And this can be interpreted as, in 5.3, that you are allowing yourself to be guided by another, presumably a person of worth, a person of wisdom, because you can allow yourself to be guided by someone else, by Hollywood, by actors, or by business people who have their own agendas. So presumably you want to allow yourself to be guided by another, and the other is Lord Jehuti, and the other is someone other than yourself, other than your own ego, your self-talk. Doing things that your ego wants you to do because it goes in accordance with your desires. So you want to be guided by another and not by yourself. Obviously, until you reach a higher status of spiritual development. So continuing 5.3, by another, hide yourself along with your son, the child of yours, and Asar. And so now he's giving her instructions. Now that he is freeing her from the prison, he is saying, go and hide. Then we go to the next line, verse 6. 6.1, Au F Nen Hau Er Heti F Neb. And go with him to live in secret. To his body will, and then now the next statement that Lord Jehuti gives is about the Heta. Hold on a minute. Do it. Sebai graciously gave me something to drink, and she wants me to wait until she gets back to her screen. Okay. So what's happening in verse 6 is that Lord Jehuti gives her instructions. Number one, in verse 4 we saw it's good to be guided by, and to be humble, and to be guided by another, and guided by someone who knows the teaching of Ma'at, which is righteousness, order, and truth. And Ma'at has two aspects, as a secular aspect and a non-secular aspect. The non-secular is for the world. Secular is the spiritual teaching that leads to spiritual enlightenment. And that's Ma'at. Ma'at has those two aspects, two wings, as it were. And so in verse 6, verse 5, we're being told, Lord Jehuti is telling her to go and go into hiding. She's going to be a fugitive now, like we said before. And to take her child with her, the child that she had with Asar. And in verse 6, and go with him to live in secret. And now the next statement, he starts telling her what is going to happen in the future. He's giving a determination of the future, a forecast, as sorts of the future, a prediction. Talking about Heru, what will happen to Heru. To his body will happen the following. His arms and legs and organs will grow with twofold strength, and his limbs will be sound and healthy. So he's allaying her fears because she's worried, and he's saying, "Don't worry, everything is going to work out. Everything is taken care of." And when you follow Ma'at, righteousness, order, and truth, you don't have to be worried about the future. You don't have to be worried about what's going to happen because it's all being determined by the destiny that you're creating. In last night's lecture, the Book of the Dead hieroglyphic translations, I talked about that issue of being an architect of your destiny and creating your ultimate fate. And if you act by Ma'at, which is what was told in the permanent rule also, you're going to lead to the positive fate. Now, what you see here, verse 7, 8, 9, these are other verses that give more background to the teaching and more of the history, but due to time, we're only hitting sections of the text. So in a dedicated longer study, we can go line by line. But here, obviously, we can go through 200 verses in one, even in one afternoon. It would take weeks. So the blank verses that you see here are verses that we're not covering today, but we're going to pick up the story as we go along to the important sections. So verse 18, 18.1, Pehiu Deb Seper Na Hemu Ketetu. And point 3, I arrived, and now she got her instructions, and she went into hiding, and she's a fugitive, and now she's saying, I arrived at the settlement of Deb. And there, I went to the area where there are houses of women who take care of children are located. I figured that a fugitive woman with her child could hide out in a place with many women and children, and that's very logical. So that's what Aset went to do. Verse 19, Hai Iu Dega Nua Sheps M Wa. And also continuing from there, and pregnant women. So there are pregnant women in this area also, in this section of town. It so happened that there was a, I think the text got lost in here. We'll go to 1.2 because it's more complete. There are impregnated ladies there as well. It is noticing of me, exalted lady, in the path walking. So what happened was that a woman noticed Aset walking on the path, and they're referring to her as a noble woman, a chef's woman. As we're going to see, she's not so noble. So the lady noticed Aset walking on the road with, in verse 20, 20.1, An Nez, Unues, Hera, Menze, Herab, En. So walking along the road with what I was carrying, and she was carrying her baby, essentially. And also remember that there were 7 scorpions walking with her as well. She slammed her doors on me when I looked at her and asked for shelter when I was in a fugitive hiding. She was in a state of being a fugitive, hiding from my brother Set, who was now king. She had a mental disease. She had the mental disease, and this is what the scripture says. She had the mental disease of anguish and fear, loathing, pride about my presence. So the lady was afraid when she saw Aset. She was afraid that Aset was going to come to her and ask for help and want to come inside. And so she slammed the door because she was afraid that she was a noble in the sense of wealthy, a kind of privileged woman who had possessions. She had a nice house and things like that. And so she was afraid. Uh, she had anguish in her heart, and the term mense, with the determinative of the bird with uh, the rounded tail, means something little, something pitiable, something negative. And so her mental condition was of anguish, of loathing, of fear, etc. Verse 21, I think we lost text. Let's go here. Verse 21. Netet hen a nech zen ra heres evda zen. So about my presence, leading off from verse 20.3, about my presence, she was anguished about her Aset's presence, and over who was with me, my child, the true heir, and my 7 protective scorpion divinities. Outraged at what had happened, at what had been done to me by this lady of high standing, my scorpion protectors talked about it amongst themselves, about this person, and they decided to give their verse 22. Metut, Zenu, and Zep, Herdep, said, and Tephen, Una. They decided to give their collective poison from point 22.3 poisons from each of their 7 stingers, all at one time, to their leader, and the leader was Tephen, and placed it on his tail, the tail of Tephen. In the meantime, the other doors were open to me. Verse 23, 23.1, Ta Seba es ak tu per es nenu. So in the meantime, while the scorpions were collecting their poison and putting it all on the tail of one of them, in the meantime, Aset was she walked over to another house, and there was another woman there who had another child, and now the second woman opened the doors for Aset, and the second woman was not a wealthy woman or a high class woman. She was a regular person. So it was 23.3, a common woman of the Delta region. She opened her doors to me, and I walked into her home. And now the next statement goes back to the issue of the scorpions. Stealthily, though, verse 24.1, Tephen, Aket, Ger, Aawi, and Seba, Jedib, Nez. Stealthily, the scorpion captain Tephen entered the house of the high-class lady by crawling under the leaves of the door of her house. And then it should be he stung her. Verse 25.1, Sa usar ket pertu zikent per usert. He stung her child. 25.3. The child of Lady Usert. Lady Usert is the well-to-do woman, and Usert is kind of also a word that symbolizes power. Usert is the god of power. And then what happened was a ruckus developed, probably because she noticed that the child was bitten, and then he started frothing at the mouth, and then she started wailing and flinging her arms, and there was probably a lamp nearby, and she probably knocked it over, and it caught on fire. The fire started, which caught on one of the columns, and the Zekint is the column. Zekint is the column of the house that holds up the roof. It caught on one of the columns of the house of Usert, and that was supporting the roof. And this all, of course, this all happened because she was rejected, and this was because Aset was rejected. This was the outcome of that rejection. Calamity is the outcome of the rejection of Aset. So if you reject Aset when she comes to your door pleading for refuge, meaning that your intellect has escaped the prison, and now it's coming to your personality for refuge and for the benefit that it can bring to you to help you grow into a life of wisdom, a life of righteousness and ma'at and order and truth and so on and so forth. If you reject that, that is like a lot of people do today. When and some of you may have had this kind of experience where you learn something in this class or in one of our other classes or somewhere else, and you want to share with someone the wisdom that you've learned, and then like you might go tell somebody about some politician that they support, and have you heard of what this politician did? And this politician is corrupt, and they did this and they did that and the other thing, and then the person say, "What are you telling me these things? I don't want to hear that." And you're lying. That's not true. And you say, "Well, here's the evidence. Here's the proof." And I don't want to hear that. That's propaganda. That's nonsense. I believe in this person, and that's all I care about, and that's all I want to know. It's like back in the day, not too far of the day. I remember very clearly in the 2004 election of George W. Bush. They were interviewing on two separate networks. They were interviewing two separate women and asked them, why do you support George W. Bush? These are women in the South, and they were of European descent. And they said because he's Christian and he's cute. And never mind that he had started a war based on lies. He's a war criminal. He's Christian and he's cute. And he has advocated torture. He is a war criminal or whatever. I don't want to hear it. He's Christian and he's cute. That's all I care about. And I don't want to hear about any Democrats. These are people who live by ideology, and the ideology, you can only vote Democrat or Republican, and because that's your ideology, not because you're living by truth. If you live by truth, you'll be independent, and you'll be living by a different standard. And if you're ignorant, and if you're low class, in that sense, then you'll be manipulated. Then you will be living by fear instead of by wisdom and understanding. And that is why society is being led to its doom the way it currently is. We're headed in that direction right now, sooner than most people think. So this disaster happened because of the rejection. And what happens in your life is if you reject Aset when she comes, and she will come at some point, when your intellect gets a little exposure, shall we say, out of the jail that the ego has placed it in. If you reject that, if the little voice in the back of your mind say, "No, I shouldn't do that. I should really act with honor and righteousness," and then the ego on the other side says, "Yeah, but I really want that, and I would enjoy having that, and so I should go for it." And if you say, "Okay, I'm going to go for it, and to hell with that Machian stuff and that righteousness and ethics," then you're putting Aset back in the prison. You, not Set. And since you are mediating, if Set has control, then you're not even in the picture. You're just a total ego. But if you have a kind of opening beyond egoism to start looking at yourself in a truthful way, then you're in between. And then you have a chance if you make the right choice. But if you choose to put Aset back in the prison, then you're headed for calamity. That's where people as a culture here are going headlong towards calamity. There's going to be a calamity of politics, of economics, of the climate. All kinds of calamities are going to befall the society, people individually and as a society, because of rejecting Aset. And that is what happens to the prideful woman. So now we're going to skip a few verses, and then we pick it up again. Verse 30, 30.1. Let me see how we're doing on time. I think we're okay on time. Right, the fire is blazing literally in a mythic sense, but I talked about how the fire blazes in your life, how you can have calamity, people get sick, and somebody, your child dies, gets a car accident, all kinds of calamities because you're not following the true path. And you can get into accidents, you can get disease, and so on and so forth. Verse 30.1, Ab, and Shed. 30.3, my heart. So then what happened was that the child of the double woman was stung, and he's frothing at the mouth. He's dying. And then Aset says, my heart was sad about what happened to such a small child, and small and helpless child. So even though the woman rejected her, Aset is feeling compassion. Verse 30.1. 31.1. Heres, se'ank, shed, bet, nas, 31.3. That child of hers. So I reflected that I would like to restore life to the child, he being innocent, and not at fault for what his mother did by rejecting me. So this gives us an indication that Aset is feeling compassion for the child, and she is reasoning that the child didn't do anything against her. The child, wasn't responsible for what the mother did, there are many people who are, when they're egoistic, they wish other people were dead, and somebody you hate somebody hates another person, and they say, I wish they were dead, I wish some accident came on them, and then something happens to their child, and the child of the person you hate gets hit by a car, and then the other person who hates it says, yeah, I'm glad their child got hit by the car, and they're going to suffer now, and all that kind of thing. And the child didn't do anything to them, but that anger and hatred is so degraded that it is directed in a like a shotgun type fashion. And you can have righteous indignation, but it should be targeted. It should be based on wisdom. It should be based on rationality and not on emotionality and egoism. And that is the downfall of humanity. Again, so Aset is showing compassion, even though she was hurt, even though she was wronged. She's showing compassion. So she says, Nas ah. So she's calling out. Verse 32. Nezhed mai na sepsin. I called out, 32.3, I called out to her. I said, come to me. He's calling the highborn lady, Usert. Now we're going to skip a couple of verses there. 35.5.1, Ua and Aset, Aawi ze he. Isis then laid her hands upon, and here is many of you who grew up in the Christian faith, you know about the teaching of laying on of hands. Jesus lays hands on Lazarus and other people and heals them, and this whole tradition about that. Here is the original. The Aset lays her hands, and here's her arms. You can see the Awi. Awi means hands, hers. Verse 36.1, Neken el seang netetem ga ahet. So she lays, 36.3, hands upon the child for the purpose of causing life to return and cure the constriction on his throat, preventing him from breathing that was suffocating him to death. Yeah, we're going to, and she heals him, of course. So we're going to skip a few verses. And the outcome of this, in verse 54.1, A ank neken mit metut. The formula for this healing, Aset says, I say, life will return to the child and the poison will die. So this is the chant, the formula for restoring life. And this is similar to those of you who have studied in the Temple of Aset philosophy course based on the teaching of Ra and Aset. This is a similar formula to how she cured Ra from the poison. Verse 57.1, we're skipping a couple of verses now again. Ket aken tu pet hetep her depra and Aset. 57.3. The fire that has engulfed the house of the privileged and anguished woman, Usur, was put out with water provided from the heavens. The heavens are thus content with the outcome and pleased with the commanding words that were spoken by Isis. So the house of the noble woman that was burning, there was no water around to stop the fire. But now, since Aset has extended the compassion and she has basically forgiven the woman for rejecting her and saved the child, the gods and goddesses of heaven are pleased and they are satisfied and they are going to stop the retaliation that is going against the noble woman. And so, yet the house is kind of damaged severely at this point. But yet, what it means is that when this compassion is extended, the fire that is engulfing the mind, because the fire represents a kind of suffering. When your mind is anguished about something, when you're worried and you can't sleep, and how are you going to pay bills? It was about this person is sick, and what am I going to do? And this is terrible, or I'm being persecuted, whatever. When you turn to Aset, those fires are put out, and the waters come through the cooling, and the mind is calmed, and peace comes back to the heart. That's what, when you turn to Aset, meaning when you turn to wisdom, when you turn to understanding, when you turn to compassion and righteousness and order and truth, that is the reward. That's what comes. A good fortune. This is what comes to a person when that happens, when Aset is accepted. Verse 58.1, Netert Usert it anze na ketze. 58.3, when the words spoken by Isis, the goddess, about Lady Usert, the privileged but anguished, conflicted woman who rejected me. Her house was on fire and burnt down. Verse 59.1. Meh nes per en ta en ka en ta. Fullness of 559.3. Fullness from want. Meh is fullness. The first word here. This is the next important teaching of this scripture, or the ones that I'm presenting today. Put it. So instead of the fire, instead of the running around with and the suffering that Lady Usur, the highborn lady, experienced, this is the other side now. This is what happened to the common lady. And the common lady, her name is being referred to as Ta, common woman of the Delta region. Delta region is the north part of Kemet, where there's a lot of papyrus swamps, and this is where Aset was hiding in the papyrus swamps. So 59.3, fullness from want was in the house of the common woman of the Delta region. And also, she had fullness in her mind. Freedom from agitation, from worries and anxieties were hers as well. So instead of having the anguish and the fear and the loathing, she accepted Aset, even though she was putting herself in danger and a child. But in that acceptance, she got abundance and she got peace and she got glory. That was her reward. And of course, what it means is that if you accept Aset in your life, that is what that's what will come to you in your life. It means a life of peace, a life of inner awakening, a life that allows you to grow beyond the troubles of the world and the sufferings of life that come along. You are living in a kind of expanded existence that is beyond these things, and so you are not going to be affected by the events of the world as ordinary egoistic people will be. Verse 60.1, Ed un na Sebai, because she opened her doors to me. And so this is a continuation of 59.3. Her mind, fullness, there was fullness in her mind. And fullness in the mind means when your mind is full of spiritual consciousness. If your mind is not full, then there is space for egoism and for fear and for anxiety to come in. So she was full of glory. And so she was free from worries and anxieties because she opened her doors to me and thereby received all my blessings and also peace of mind. Now we're going to skip a few more verses. Actually, I think that's it. Yes, that's it. Actually, the verses go up to about 100 and almost like 200. So this is the teaching that I wanted to present for this lecture today. This is the 2016 Kemetic New Year and Birthday of Goddess Aset lecture with sections from the scripture and of course, if this is what has been presented here so far, you can imagine this is maybe only a tenth or a 20th of the scripture or something like that. Only about 20 verses or so, 25 verses or something, and there are like almost 200. So you can imagine to go prospecting for the wisdom teaching that is presented in them, in the scripture, and this is not, in my view, it's not even the highest. The highest is probably the scripture of Ra and Aset, and that is part of the study program of the Egyptian Mystery School. And so just very quickly, let me go through a couple of things, and then we can take a couple of questions if there are any. Final discussion. This is the Temple of Isis.info or templeofisis.net website. And just to give so these are two web addresses that go to the same website. And that is, we'll take just a brief look at the website right now. In this website, you will find, this is the front page, and this is the an introduction to the site. This is the home page. And here's the menu up here. You can find a bio for Dr. Muata Ashby and Sebai Ashby. You can find let me shift around the pages so you can see the wonderful images on the front page. These are pictures that we took from the trip to Kemetic last year. And each time, this is a special website design that each time you go to the site, you'll see a new picture, a new image. These are images from the temple that we took last year, but also these are images from other temples of Aset around the world. There's a temple of Aset in Greece, and this is the one in Greece. There's one that we just saw before this one that was in Rome. There's a temple in Germany. This is the one from Rome. And this is an excavation, I think, in Germany of a temple of Aset there. This is in Pompeii, Italy. This is in Egypt. And this was on one of the boats that you go to the temple, which is on an island. This is another temple that was just discovered recently in Giza. So there are many. There's a page that has information about the images. There's more information. I just gave a basic introduction of who is Isis and who is Aset. Aset is the name of the goddess given by the ancient Egyptians, and Isis basically is the European translation, the Greeks. There is a summary of the Asar resurrection myth that goes into some other things that I did not go into today. And then there is a summary of the teaching of Aset and Ra that I mentioned, but I did not go into that at all very much. So these are different pages that you can go to. And this one here talks about the course of the Egyptian Mystery School, of the Temple of Aset, the teaching that I talked about, the scripture of Aset and Ra that is the basis of the main course. And there's an article here on the initiatic path of the Temple of Aset. So let's go quickly, and because this link leads us to here also, to the Kemetic University Egyptian Mystery School. The Kemetic University Egyptian Mystery School is where you take the courses of the Temple of Aset. And currently, these are the courses that are available. You have the Kemetic 101, the Kemetic Life Skills, the Asar class, Egyptian Mystery Studies, and you have the Temple of Isis certificate course. And this is an advancing course, and here's a pop-up about the upcoming trip to Kemet for those who are interested. This course is a philosophy course. You can look at the video presentation. It gives an introduction to the course and what it's all about. And this gives you a summary. It's like a little syllabus of the course information. And this is the scripture that course is based on. That's a different scripture from the one that we looked at today. We looked at the creation papyrus earlier. So you can look through here for information about the course. If you're interested, this is a picture of when we went to Kemetic last year, and from that same room that the music video was from. And this is the format of how the course was conducted, and also the Netarian Conference of 2015 dealt with part of this. It had an extensive summary. The course is much more detailed, but there was the conference was a summary of the teaching. Another picture from the trip to Kemetic, the Temple of Asar, and this is when we're on the boat. And we went to visit the temple at night also, which was beautiful. And during the day. And this is the main book that we have currently. There will be a forthcoming book, probably next year, based on the translation of the teaching of Ra and Aset. This particular book has a summary of it, as well as there's a summary on the website as well. But this book is more of a mythic teaching about the wisdom of Aset. The upcoming book will be based on the hieroglyphic text that the students have been studying in the course. So look for that next year. And this is the one that we covered, the Asar resurrection today, the Lunian creation myth, and the hieroglyphs for beginners. For this kind of study like what we did today and what is done in the Kemetic University studies, it is important to have at least a basic introduction to the hieroglyphs, and that's what this book provides. And this is a meditation poster and a meditation mat that was prepared for this teaching. Okay, so that is the conclusion of the presentation. For those who have any questions, go to the Temple of Aset, the Temple of Isis.info or templeofisis.net website, and you can find all these links there. And I think that concludes the program. If there are any questions, we can deal with those now. Why is the glyph of a phallus with secretions used to denote poison? Okay, good question. Let's see if we can find it. I lost it again. The word for poison is metut. And metut is composed, this is an abbreviation, it's not the only spelling. The spelling is composed of this particular word is composed of the two glyphs. And one is the phallus, and one is lips that are spitting a liquid. And the reason why the phallus is used is not because semen is poison. That is a wrong interpretation. It is being used here not in a sexual context. It is used because the penis is the kind of emblematic glyph that means like a tube, a vessel, something that contains a conduit through which fluid passes. And so the phallus can be used in various different symbols. It can be used, it's used in the word umet, ab, I believe, also, which is a dullness of mind. So it can have different context depending on how it's used. So here it's being used as a tube through which a liquid is squirted, and like the tail, it's something similar to the tail of the scorpion, which is like a tube through which a poison is squirted out, and although the scorpion not so much, it's more like a kind of a stinger, but you get the idea. So it doesn't mean that the male semen is poisonous. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's being used from a functional perspective. Any other questions or comments? Okay, the recording of this presentation should be ready in a couple of hours. When it gets downloaded and re-uploaded, it'll be probably placed in on the Temple of Isis website.
It's a pictures. I can put them up. You put them up.
And those of you who are on any of the email lists, the Temple of Aset Google groups, or the Temple of Shaddai Neder group groups, or the Egyptian Yoga Google groups, followers, you'll get a notice for it as well. If you are a subscriber to the YouTube channel, the Egyptian Yoga YouTube channel, Temple of Shaddai Neder YouTube channel, you should be getting a notice of that as well. So a notice will be sent out when the video is ready. Hey, do to everyone for joining, and a happy New Year, and also happy birthday of Aset, and may you all be freed from the prison of egoism, and may you all be able to open your doors and let Aset come in when she comes knocking, seeking refuge in your home, which is your personality. Dua Aset, Heteru Mudneter, Debet Bet Henut, Abu Diptid Neteru. Adorations to she, Isis Hathor, Mother of the Divine Self, Mistress of Abaton, Queen of the Gods and Goddesses. Om Hetep, Hetep, Hetep. So, for those who would like to, I will go ahead and play the video one more time, and I will close this out. Hetep. Those who like to listen.